All right. Good day and welcome to the Goadkicker podcast. I'm your host, of course, Carl D. Smith. The D stands for Dare to Say No to Drugs. I am broadcasting live from the Cornucopia 7 that is in a fixed orbit right above Iowa, USA. If you look up in the night sky with a telescope, you can probably see me. I'll wave out the window here. I don't know if you can see me that well. I should have got tinted windows. All the cool spaceships have tinted windows, but I didn't want to pay extra for them. Lord knows I have enough to pay for. Of course, as always, I have my reminder, my hat, to remind you up front instead of at the end of the podcast to plug harm reduction services in your area. If you're not aware of what harm reduction is, look into it. Look into our first episode. We talked a little bit about it, but they are human services that are offered that basically help treat people involved in what are traditionally considered high risk activities as human beings with souls who deserve the basic amenities of healthcare and access to the safety and care that exist in our modern healthcare facility, regardless of their lifestyle, intent, or ability to pay. So try to find a way to get involved with a harm reduction center or organization if you can, even if it's just donating. I know that in my past dealings with the church, we sort of always poo poo people who think they just need to throw money at things and not be involved. But trust me, some of these health organizations are more than happy for people who just want to write a check because it enables those who are sold out to the mission to be able to do the work that they want to do in their community. Not every community has harm reduction services. Not every harm reduction service is labeled as such. Sometimes there's just well-meaning clinics that do those services or organizations, excuse me, as I open a soda, without labeling them harm reduction. I'm going to put something in the chat here just to ensure that it's refreshing. Oh, yep, it is. I was getting a weird blank look over here, but it is refreshing, so that's excellent. Okay. So, friends, it's been a week already since my first ever live stream of the Goadkicker podcast. It, it went pretty well, I think. We didn't have a server crash from everybody piling on board, which is perfectly fine. The entire intent of this, speaking of, I should hit record. Once again, I have failed to prioritize recording for the audio only listeners. So, audio only listeners, you missed about 5 minutes of preamble, actually 3 minutes, but don't worry about that. This is the Goadkicker podcast. You know who I am, Carl D. Smith, and this is episode X-02, recording live on Twitter. Not on Twitter, on Twitch. I've already failed. I can hear the pitter patter of little rabbit feet upstairs, so that means our rabbit rain is having the run of the house while I record. So, all right. So, what are we talking about this week? I have a few topics I wanted to touch on. I have some notes. If you wonder why I keep looking down at the console here, I keep meaning to leave my keyboard free, but then I realize I have like a mouth and a voice and a throat, and that I don't have to engage in the chat box itself. I can just reply audio and you can hear me. The chat box is there for you, not for me. Uh-oh, Steely just fell asleep. My little raccoon. He's asleep. That's great. I've bored my virtual pet to death. So, speaking of falling asleep, how many of you have ever been so tired that you do things you wouldn't normally do? Now, that's an open-ended question because it could mean a behavior that you normally wouldn't say yes to because your inhibitions are softened. You may have a lessened ability to reason or to pay crucial attention to details or to consequences. Or it could just be that even habits that you do daily parts of your routine are unable to be performed when it comes to being under rested, underslept. Um, Great story today I got in my text while I was at work that someone I know who will remain nameless got up and was tired and poured themselves a bowl of Cheerios and got themselves a cup of coffee, drank some of the coffee, went to go get some milk, poured the milk into the coffee cup instead of the bowl, was irritated at what they'd done, and wanted the milk in the cereal, so then they dumped the coffee cup in the cereal bowl, coffee and milk and all. So then they had coffee flavored Cheerios this morning with their milk. So that's definitely something you don't do when you're awake. And I don't think that's a taste sensation that's going to sweep America. But again, you get so tired as an adult, those things happen. I was trying to think of some things that have happened in my life when I'm tired, and Lord knows I shouldn't be on eBay when I'm tired. Like that's the worst time to be online shopping is like 12:30 in the morning. You can't get to sleep. You're up in bed just scrolling. Instead of doom scrolling, you're doom shopping. And things seem reasonably priced, and your budget seems infinite when you're tired. Not a good time, not a fiscally responsible time to make financial decisions. Um, Sometimes it comes down to your clothing when you're tired. When I used to work full time as a pharmacist, I one time had to call and beg my wife to bring me a pair of shoes at work. Not because I didn't wear shoes, but because the shoes that looked perfectly fine when I left the house that morning were mismatched. And when I got to work, I realized I had two entirely different shoes on. And it wouldn't be a big deal, but I mean, you're in a profession where they uh, used to trust you and count on you to be some sort of a pinnacle of healthcare knowledge and professionalism, and having two mismatched shoes doesn't exactly instill trust in a parent of a toddler who's needing medicine. So she was kind enough to bring me my shoes and save me the embarrassment, which wouldn't have been the most embarrassing thing I've ever been a part of in pharmacy, but definitely was overtired at that time when I dressed. Bathrooms are a source of misunderstanding when you're tired. When I went to Creighton University, well, I happen to have my shirt on. For pharmacy school, I was always the walking dead. I worked part time, sometimes even full time hours part time, and went to school at that level of education. And I wasn't the most disciplined student anyway, so I killed a lot of time doing things that weren't fruitful. And I just amassed exhaustion. You would have to cram, it was a vicious circle. Plus, there was just so much material, and I went back to school as a non traditional. And so the brain maybe wasn't as pliable as some of my classmates. And so I had to work a little bit harder. And I've just never been a great studier. Matter of fact, I'm someone who I think might have benefited from amphetamine use in school if I didn't think such a thing probably has some negative effects that you don't want to risk. But I am someone who probably could have been prescribed Focalin or Adderall and benefited greatly from it in a school setting. But nevertheless, I would show up to school completely exhausted, and I would forget things in my car and forget things at home, and completely space off going to classes or what day it was or when there was a quiz due online. But more than that, because I introduced the whole concept of bathrooms, what I was getting at was I would almost always walk into like the wrong bathrooms. Of course, it was like 4 in the morning at school. I would go early so I could study and everything, and I was like the only one there. But you kind of get in there, and there's that little disorientation because you don't see urinals, and the sinks are on the wrong side of the wall and everything. And then you realize, oh, now I just need to get out of here without seeing anybody else. That's happened to me on multiple occasions. At my current job, you know, most of them are what we call in the Midwest one-seaters, right? So It's a private bathroom, and it's used by male and female alike. Just whoever happens to be in there, much like a family bathroom at Target or wherever else. But which is a weird turn of phrase, family bathroom. But I don't want to get into that. But I realized today I was so tired this morning that I did my business and washed my hands and went to leave, and the door wasn't locked. I hadn't locked the door. Luckily, there was no traffic in that part of the data center, so that was my bathroom, and I was the king of my domain. But that could have been a Three's Company moment because I was too tired. So being tired as an adult is just a given. Even those of us who manage to only work 40 hours a week and don't have children find ourselves just absolutely exhausted. There's always more activity than there is energy. And sometimes it's good activity. You're up late playing Elden Ring or painting gaming miniatures or talking to friends. But whatever it is that keeps you up, and not many of us get a full night's sleep. And even those of us who do don't feel fully rested. So if you're tired out there listening to this, and most of you are going to be within my age range, and so you're probably tired, I feel your pain. Sean says he was so tired that he used A535. I'm not sure what that is. I'm not sure what you're getting at there. Obviously, it's something that shouldn't be. Toothpaste. Oh, pain cream. Okay, like Aspercream or something like that. I bet. I had a lot of phone calls. Oh yeah, okay. So that's probably a capsaicin cream, like something that has like Zovirax type ingredient. That would be miserable. I've had plenty of people call me when I worked at the Poison Control Center that do exactly that. Matter of fact, I had on multiple occasions, which is unreal to me because we only covered 3 states out of the 50, and I only worked on part of the day, the overnight shift. But on multiple occasions, I had elderly call me that had used super glue in their eye because they got up and had dry eye and they thought they were grabbing their eye drop and used the super glue, and it happened to be on the nightstand, which raises all sorts of questions, but there you have it. So anyway, being tired is no fun, and I appreciate any of you who are altering your activities to make time to pop in here. I appreciate it. Cheers to you. And I need to continually wet my whistle. I've got some dry throat going on. Anybody out there who has had a good stretch of history without being sick, I applaud you. I myself am enjoying such a stretch. I thought I had COVID on a couple instances in the last couple years and have always tested negative. It's just been like something probably related to a virus of some sort, or exhaustion or stress or something. But I've had actual symptoms, sore throat, cough, the runny nose thing, the exhaustion. But it tends to pass pretty fast, and I have, as of so far, have not had COVID. I'm vaccinated. I've had my booster. We do try to avoid unnecessary gatherings of people. We have older parents who are still with us, luckily, and we don't want to be responsible for being a bigger vector for germs than we already are with the kids being at public schools and with Sandy working in healthcare and me sometimes working in healthcare. Actually, the data center, practically works, solo there. So that's not as big of a deal. But there is a mixture of people coming and going from different bubbles. And so as COVID heats up again, regardless of what you're hearing in your area right now, as far as, the usual fear-mongering or poo-poo or complacency, there's a lot of virus going around. And I've heard of new strains. It's always hard to tell fact from fiction and how much is alarmism, but it looks like we're about a month away from having a pretty decent spike again. I forgot to get my flu shot this year. I'm the world's worst pharmacist. I just don't want to be at a pharmacy that much that the idea of stopping by a pharmacy on the way home from work when I don't need to be at one, not being paid to be at one, just stresses me out. And I just managed to never get my flu shot. And here we are in January. I'll eventually have to get it as I'm currently in the process of doing orientation for a part-time job as a pharmacist again. I really need to have my flu shot, so that'll be something that'll be on my to-do list. But yeah, yeah, there are lots of germs going around. So, all right, I wanted to talk a little bit tonight, and I should reveal the topics up front so you know what you're getting into. We're going to talk a little bit about resilience. We're going to talk a little bit about going to the movie theaters in the year 2023. And then we're going to top it off with talking about how we measure success as an adult. And hopefully we'll have time. I'll cut it short if I have to. But how you measure success as an adult, if it's important, how to prioritize it, and put it into context of, this week's pop culture discussion, which will be about Valiant Comics, which I had a wild hair and recently got into. So again, I should say, not for the first time, I got back into them because of my mulling over the topic of adult success, especially as you get older. You're 48, your kids are suddenly teenagers, they won't be around forever, and you have a career. And is that career your legacy? And if so, how do you deal with the crushing disappointment of that fact? Do you change careers? Do you look at your family? Do you look at your friends? Do you value leisure differently? Those sorts of things. We'll talk about that a little bit. And that'll be an ongoing discussion. Obviously, it's not something that we'll be able to get into in any real depth in one episode, but definitely a topic that I've been reflecting on quite a bit lately. So hopefully you guys aren't buried in snow. I know some of you that are up north that have had some. Minnesota, my friend Noel had 2 feet of snow, which down here we usually measure in inches. We don't measure in feet, so that's terrifying. I know Sean is up in Canada, so I'm sure you've had a little snow. I would assume that Canada is just a winter wonderland for months, but maybe I'm mistaken about that, as I was mistaken with the Denver area when I moved there and lived there briefly. I thought I would be up to my eyeballs in snow constantly in the winter, and it was a mild winter. And yep, Sean does say he had close to 2 feet, so that's unreal. Down here, we've had big snows like that. Usually they're from a sustained system of storms. It's usually not all dumped at once. There was one year when we had quite a bit, and people were freaking out about what the weight of the snow was going to do to their roofs. And we live in an area where no one had roof rakes of any sort, and nor did we know how to use them or what they were. And it was a comical winter because people were scrambling for these things. There were advertisements of who had them in stock, and people were using them incorrectly and pulling snow down on themselves and on their vehicles. And it was wild just because we had so much snow in a short amount of time. Usually ours is accumulated over days and days. So anyway, yeah, we're fortunate. We had a pretty good rainstorm the other night, and I don't like it soggy and cold myself. I mean, I'm no fan of snow, but at least you get to look at it a little bit. And the rain is just wet and dirty and cold and miserable. And yeah, the weather has been weird. So, resilience. Are you a resilient person? I like to think of myself as somewhat resilient, although I tend to have my my woe is me public moments as much as anybody. But resilience, is being able to push forward in negative situations, uncomfortable situations, or unfair situations. What makes you resilient is the ability to shrug those things off and still be somewhat goal and task oriented. I think a lot of resilience in the terms of like armed conflict, and not so much for soldiers, but for the citizenship. people in the Ukraine, or we're not supposed to call it the Ukraine. I apologize. That people in Ukraine who who have to live and go about their daily business with war constantly at their door, maybe even close to home, loved ones serving, or in the process of becoming refugees to get further away from conflict and loss of power and all those sorts of things. Um, it makes you resilient, but resilience and perseverance are two different things. Resilience to me is just your ability to function while you're being rained down upon by negativity or unfortunate circumstances or literal slings and arrows. Some people are just more resilient than others. It takes more to break through their armor. But perseverance is a different thing altogether. If you're a type of person who perseveres, your attitude is that you want to continue forward, and you're making a conscious effort with your attitude and your actions to continue on. Whereas resilience is just maybe more almost natural. It's more of a nature and nurture type thing where we're just stoic, tough people and things don't get to us. Perseverance is something that's learned and practiced, and sometimes is related to your ethics, or even your different faith or your guiding beliefs, if such a thing exists outside of faith. Just the things that sort of become your prime directives, as you were. Maybe you value the attitude of pushing forward, even when your body or your mental health or your emotions and those things are finding it difficult to carry on. I would like to think of myself as someone who perseveres, although I don't always have the best attitude, maybe, but I do feel like carrying on. It's not easy to change careers at 48 years old. It has been a weird few years, starting right around 2019, where I had sort of made a soft exit from the pharmacy profession, working public health with the Poison Control Center. And then, of course, the COVID nightmare happened right around there, and the pandemic and the shutdowns. And emerging from that, and finances and jobs were affected, and family dynamics were affected, and routines that usually you could count on, like death and taxes, like the kids going to school, even those things were changed like markedly. And some people were more resilient than others during that time. And I've had some conversations. I've had some, Twitter private messages, conversations, things of that nature, where you get to see how people are being affected, even people you normally don't have a personal, in-person relationship with. And I can think on multiple occasions where people I otherwise only see as their cheery online selves that had little breaks, had little cracks, and struggled. And that was the test of their resilience. And I'm here to tell you from my experiences with the Poison Control Center that a lot of people, I don't want to use the word fail, but fell to the test of their resilience, and suicide attempts and suicide successes were through the roof. And that was, along with the financial aspect of that job, part of the reason I just couldn't handle it anymore. My job had went to typical toxicology and drug information, to one after another suicide attempt, and what do we do, and here's what they took. And it wasn't only from the ERs and the EMTs calling me. It was mothers who still were at home and were panicked and hadn't been home, or people themselves that had done it and then panicked. It was tough. And Those are people who discovered the end of their resilience. And then there's those who their perseverance can carry them a little bit further. Their perseverance to operate wounded, let's say, is, for whatever reason, more motivated, more adept. And it's nothing to be ashamed of, I think, if you've found your limit, because we all will eventually. And some people are able to handle misfortune with tremendous dignity. I think of Chadwick Boseman, for instance, how unfair and ridiculous and heartbreaking his illness is and his loss. Um, Someone who handled it with great dignity and privacy. And I can think of other people who do not handle it well. And it explodes their lives and their family and their faith and their emotional well being. And it becomes a betrayal of life to them. And so there's a difference in this resilience and this perseverance. And I did want to kind of throw out there, since I do sort of throw these sort of things out in our podcast, is to kind of think about that in the coming week. Are you resilient? Uh, do you have perseverance? And what are the differences? And do you know your limits? Have you been tested to your limits? How do you think you would react if you sort of hit, you know, that last hit point left on your meter, And I think I've been there in the last couple years. And the thing about perseverance is there's times when you just don't want to. You just don't want to. And those are when you start to have intrusive thoughts. It isn't necessarily self harm, but it's a weird fatalism where you're just like, c'est la vie. I mean, okay, like it's been a good run, but things aren't getting better. And you choose not to maybe see hope and see the positivity around you. And those are dark days. And I just wanted to kind of bring up the fact that we all go through that. And our breaking points are all at very, very, very different places. And it's nothing to be ashamed of. And I think you just need to find people that you can talk to. And if it's something that's sustained, maybe reaching out for professional consultation isn't the worst thing in the world. There's medicine for those who want to go down that road. Counseling obviously is a very important step, not only for being able to talk and vent those feelings and have those discussions, but also for feedback and for accountability. Someone that sees you and sees your struggle, and you can make a commitment to, and maybe learn some coping mechanisms to help your perseverance. So, apropos of really nothing, I was just a topic that was on my heart this last week, and I thought it would be good to bring up on the podcast. There's a lot of interesting things lately in the world of nerd communication. And one of them is this notion that we need to fix men. We need to fix how we communicate and sort of try to walk back some of the toxic nature of masculinity. And I'm in agreement of that. I think anyone who's been around men as a whole can agree that our behavior is subpar and embarrassing at best. But one of the things that's been a challenge that's been proffered for 2023 as a part of New Year's resolutions is that men tell other men that they love one another and that they appreciate one another. And my friends and I do try to do that. Sometimes it still feels a little awkward. And again, that's that toxicity and that sort of social conditioning that we have. But I think it's good that we're having this discussion as adult nerds, geeks, and some of us men, that it's okay to talk about this stuff. And it's okay to be weak and to admit that we have breaking points and to realize that we all can't carry the same burdens or the same amount of burdens, and that sometimes people have a bad day when someone else in the same situation doesn't. And those are honest and frank discussions, I think, that are important to have. And no one talks about those things. We talk a lot about, you know, trivial things. And, to quote a song that I love from my teenage years, why do we say, "How are you doing today?" when you really mean, "Do you want paper or plastic?" It's like we've weaponized this sort of cordial interaction in our communication. Uh, but what we really want to talk about and what we're really getting at a lot of time is masked or hidden or pressed down. So think about your resilience and your perseverance and where you're at with those and how they're different. And I'm going to take a little break to wet my whistle. And when I come back, for both audio listeners and for those of you here for the live stream, we're going to jump right into talking about going to the movies in 2023. I will be right back. All right, that's all the break I needed. I hate to take too long of a break, but sometimes just drinking off camera, power drinking, power hydrating is much appreciated. So thanks for indulging me in that little break. As we headed into the break in our chat here, Sean, one of our attendees, one of our friends, someone that I love and appreciate having in my life, did write that him and his band all have mental health issues of some sort, and they make it known that it's a judgment free zone, that they're all there for one another, they appreciate having each other around, that they love one another. And he admitted also that it's difficult because of some of our training as men in our society, especially here in North America. You know, but it doesn't mean that we're not grateful for each other's company. And I think that's wonderful. I think that's where we start. I think that is where we need to be, because not that you need to trick people into being well, but in our weak moments when our perseverance and our resilience fails, that doesn't mean it's the end of the line. People don't just hit some magic hit point total and that's when they cash out. People operate wounded for years, broken, and maybe in a condition that they won't easily salvage. But when you hit those low points and it's more than what you can bear, sometimes what keeps you in the game is knowing that you have those people who are dependent on you, appreciative of you, affected by your presence in their lives, that they aren't just NPCs that disappear when they're out of your sight, that you're all a part of this ecosystem that that are important to one another, that you're a part of their environment and you're a part of theirs. And that accountability of knowing that removing yourself from the equation or harming yourself or engaging in some sort of self-harming activity would let them down, and not because you need to operate by guilt, but because they'd be let down. You didn't come to them for some strength, and they're there to offer it. So I think those sorts of friendships, especially among men, is very important. And again, this sort of topic's not always comfortable to talk about. And matter of fact, sometimes segueing into them and out of them is weird, especially for a podcast. It's ostensibly about pop culture, right? And what nerd culture's like on and off the screen. Um, but yeah, it's important to think about. So let's put it aside. I'm not even going to try to segue out of that and maintain any sort of integrity. And we're just going to move right into talking about what it's like to see a movie in 2023. You know, I thought movie theaters were dead. I thought that after 2019, 2020, that movie theaters as we know it, especially with the rise of streaming and their new format of allowing things to go to home play, relatively early in the cycle, and of course, the whole riff between Scarlett Johansson and her studio because Black Widow, underperformed, so to speak, but of course they're the ones that chose to put it up, and then her incentives and her pay were based on box office. But the numbers are skewed because of the home release initiative, and so it all looked like something as simple and common as the experience of going to a movie theater would be done, but it didn't. It stuck in there. We had a few theater chains that went belly up, and a few that closed, and some that won't recover. There's a couple that died that needed to die long ago. I'm thinking of the one over on like 120th and Center that showed like second and third run movies for $1 and haven't cleaned the theaters for like 30 years. But there's been more movies. Movies have almost become what TV were like in our youth, in that we have a shared experience now because the options are fewer. Music and movies, for the most part, the access now is wide open, and we all have very, very, very different experiences with media. And so we don't have like common touchstones. Like, there's people I know who know what the show V was, or Alf, or things of that nature, because we all were watching the same thing, because we all had the same 3 channels. And even when cable came, there wasn't a tremendous glut of channels, so a lot of us had a lot of the same experiences there. But movies now, they're so lesser as far as big studio theater release movies, that we're all seeing the same movies again, and it's kind of fun. I haven't seen any of the Knives Out movies yet, and I mean to. I just don't have the patience to sit and watch a movie usually, but those are on my list of to do. But it's cool to watch my friends all talk about these movies and enjoy them and speculate about them. It's neat to see them have a shared experience instead of all of us watching different stuff and all of us feeling like we're on separate islands. And that's when the community aspect of being a geek or a nerd or whatever you want to call being a human being that has interest in imaginative fiction. How about that? That's when it really shines, is when we can share that as a positive fandom by discussion. And they always say that art affects you because it elicits a response of some sort. And as much as people might poo-poo it, even something as pedestrian and corporate as a Marvel Cinematic Universe movie, it's still art. It's still a craft. Those people are still trained professionals, from those making the sets and the lighting and the makeup and the acting itself, and the writers that go into that, and the people who edit and know how to string along an audience, and the people who do the soundtrack and sound design. All of those things, from the colors and the marketing and the length of the movie, all of that stuff is intentionally done by people who are artists in their own fields. And, it's pretty interesting, I think, to hear what other people think about their experiences with that same piece of art. And some art is better than others, but usually it's pretty subjective, right? So it's sort of hard to compare apples and oranges. And Some people like apples, and they like apples a lot. And those discussions are being had, and it's super cool. It's super cool. Um, but where I was going with that is lately there's been uh, a lot more movies to select from at the theater. They're slowly coming out of their shell a little bit and kind of dipping their toe back into the waters of box office releases. And my son and I saw a lot of movies in the last few months. There just seemed like there was a bunch to see, with Black Panther being the most recent one. And he's gone with his friends to see a couple others, which I had no interest in. But it kind of snuck up on us. And then today, as I was preparing for this podcast and thinking about how our movie experience in 2023 is going to be interesting, both because of the way that our these viruses are still staying with us, but how we've developed a little bit of complacency. And there's some indication that maybe the economy is slightly on the mend. And even if it isn't, that people are going to need escapism that's affordable and accessible. Streaming has sort of hit like its plateau, and I think people are anxious to get out and to do things together or by themselves rather than just continually stay on their couch. Although I'm a happy to be on the couch kind of guy, but there's a little return to normalcy with the movie theater. But the selection is still weird, the selection of these movies. So I have in front of me, which someone sent to me today, is kind of a calendar for the upcoming year of some of the major releases coming. And it's a mixed bag, man. And I can't see myself going to see many of these, but think in the back of your head as you hear these listed, how many of these are worth risking a germ heavy environment if you're still concerned about that, or a financially taxing environment. Not that it's cheap to watch these at home, but I don't know how many of these are worth paying to see to start with when they'll eventually just end up on a streaming service that you're already paying for. But the fact that there's so many movies of various quality that are actually coming to theaters, I think is a positive sign. But let's discuss these a little bit. The first one on the list is Megan, about the AI doll, human-like doll, that they somehow altered her eyes to look like those big eye paintings from the 60s. Yeah, someone is already excited about that one, Pie in the Sky. Yeah, and Megan, it looks super goofy and weird. I'm almost glad that they did that to her eyes, though, and gave her sort of that plastic, over Botox kind of expression on her face. Because if they would have just cast a little girl and said, "Oh, she's an android," that is really hard to sell, to suspend your belief. For those of us who don't immerse themselves into that sort of movie on a regular basis. And so I think that looks actually kind of interesting, although I would never pay to see that movie. But I think it looks like it might be well made. I mean, movies about AI children, or things of that nature, AI humanoids, don't quite bat 500 in my book. I think they're closer to like 100 because most of them are awful. And I get what they're saying, and there's something interesting there about that whole notion of sentience and personhood with artificial created beings. But they all aren't going to be ex machina. Kubrick and Spielberg worked together on AI, and it was sort of far along in development, but not filming. And then Kubrick passed away, and Spielberg finished it, and it is a hot mess. And I feel like they missed the mark there a little bit. Maybe something like Megan, where the bar is set a little lower, and maybe it'll be a little less philosophical and preachy, might be the way to go for these discussions that are more and more becoming headline news and less science fiction. I mean, let's be honest. There's a lot of heat right now in the world of coding because Chat GPT, I think that's called. There's a new AI program where you can say, "Hey, I need a front end developed in Java that allows me to have a pull down menu, one input, blah, 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 blah." You communicate those very specific instructions to the AI, and it's able to compile code of a basic nature for you. I saw a gentleman today claim that he was able to translate from Java to Python the functionality of a block of code that he wrote, and the AI perfectly replicated his expectations, translating it, basically compiling it to another language, and it saved him days of work. And as amazing as that is, it's also scary. I mean, it's really going to change things. I mean, we've always been fighting against automation, right? I mean, that's always the worry is you take the human out of the labor, and what happens to the human. So anyway, Megan, it's an interesting movie to be something that has an anticipation for it, because in the old days, in the before times, it would have just been another movie released in January. And if you watch Red Letter Media, you know what they say about January movies. But we'll go on. Next up in February, there's two movies listed on this chart. There's Quantumania, which is the next Ant-Man movie, and I cannot believe that Ant-Man has had 3 movies. I mean, honest to God, that is the weirdest Marvel property, along with Guardians of the Galaxy. Absolutely unexpected that they would continue those franchises that long. And this one has the interesting responsibility, I guess would be the word to use, that it's setting up the next phase of what Marvel's going to do with their tied-in movies. Now, we just went through a so-called phase of Marvel movies where they were loose and didn't seem to work towards a common goal of any sort, and it felt weird, even though that's what movies have always been. But we've been spoiled by the orchestration and the synchronization of the storytelling. And they're going to get back to that. And it'll be interesting to see what happens. And this here movie is the one that's supposed to set all that off. So we'll see. We'll see what Kang does. Shortly after Ant-Man is Cocaine Bear. And that's a movie I actually have some interest in, although I won't go see it at the theater. Cocaine Bear is going to be a weird curiosity at the best, but you know what? The whole concept of it being based on a true story about a dumped supply of narcotics into a forest that a bear gets into and just loses its mind. And I am like eyeball deep in bear research right now anyway because of the novel that I'm writing. And Cocaine Bear is something that makes me giddy that it exists. And again, it's the type of movie that has got publicity and marketing, and is one of 2 so-called big movies releasing in February. It's nuts. It's absolutely nuts. This is something that should be, I don't even remember that movie coming out, or I heard buzz about it, or it went direct to streaming or something. It's gonna be wild, and I'm excited to see it. Again, not a theater movie for me, but I don't go to the theater much unless it's with my kid anyway. But just a wild movie that it even exists. It could be really fun. After that, in March, we have quite a few movies, and that's when we start to ramp up for these big popcorn movies, right? So Creed 3 is coming out. I've not seen any of the Creed movies. I've heard nothing but good things about them. Another Scream. I've liked exactly 0 Scream movies. I don't see what the hype is about. In context of when Scream 1 came out, in the time that it came out, I can see why it was significant in its tone and the way it chose to tell a story and sort of the meta version of it. But I still didn't enjoy it. And it's hard for me not to enjoy something with Drew Barrymore in it anyway. So, but it wasn't for me. And the fact that they keep sort of digging it back up is really disappointing. Maybe they'll do something incredible with it. I think it's just time to just do some new things. But I'm not the one signing the checks, so maybe it'll be great. It's kind of fun to get some horror movies early in the year. I'm still a horror guy at heart, even though I don't see a lot of modern horror movies. But I love to see the discussion of the stories and the execution and the effects, and then of course the response of my friends is always welcome. Um, Shazam, the next Shazam movie comes out in March. The first one was a lot of fun. That's what I personally want in a superhero movie, is that sort of goofy innocence with it, along with the action. There's been some flap about how they've had to edit a scene out of the movie because people were so offended at how childlike it was with him throwing a truck at a dragon. I'm all for that. I wish that whole tone of that movie was like that, but they're not selling that movie to me. I'm not going to make them recoup their money. I'm not the demographic they're after. But again, I don't have any reason to think that'll be anything less than entertaining. A new John Wick movie in March. People love John Wick. I've not seen any John Wick movies. I've really soured to gun violence for the most part. And that movie is gun fu, at least from what I can tell. Um, and we got some drop frames again, I just noticed. So hopefully this isn't stuttering out too much for you guys. But I just think it's this time of night, because I think last night when I was streaming, it was about now when it dumped a few frames too. I wonder if there's something that cycles. Anyway, um, John Wick. If you enjoy John Wick, if you get into that sort of what used to be John Woo style gunplay, but like to the next level, by all means enjoy it. I mean, there's nothing wrong with it. It's just, to me, I'm done with guns. But I play Fortnite, so I'm a hypocrite. Um, the Dungeons and Dragons movie comes out the very end of March, and I won't lie to you, I will probably go see Dungeons and Dragons in the theater. There is no reason it will be good. Matter of fact, it might be Clash of the Titans remake bad, but I'll go see it. And there's a bugbear in it, an owl bear, not a bugbear, an owl bear. I said the wrong thing. And a gelatinous cube, and they're leaning really hard into that first edition experience, as well as I noticed with the interaction between the characters, sort of the modern aesthetic with D&D, which will be a topic on another issue or episode of Goadkicker. I want to talk a little bit about the flavor of D&D and how it's changed over the last 40 years, and how that's okay. But this movie has a little bit of something for all the different generations of D&D fan, and I'm anxious to see what they do with it. And I hope it's just a big stupid adventure, like The Mummy, but more stupid. And I'll be 100% happy with it, because I wish that those kind of movies are getting made, and they were getting made by the dozens in the 80s, because that's the market that existed at that time. And now they're so worried that something has to be an absolute blockbuster that a lot of these kind of goofy entertainment escapist type movies just maybe don't have a chance. And it's a shame. The Beastmaster should not exist, and it would not exist probably in today's market, but D&D does now. And I've not seen the other D&D movies, the ones that are like famously awful. Um, but I don't want to miss out on this experience in the theater. And I may take my daughter. She's played some D&D through a club at school, and she's had some experience with it thanks to Stranger Things. And it could be a good time. And worst case scenario, it's dumb and we laugh about it and forget about it. So, those are little experiences I like to have with my kids. My dad, if I can tell a story. What about the other Beastmaster movies? I never saw any of them, and I know that there was like a series as well, and I never dipped into it. And I've watched a lot of Highlander spin-offs, and so it's not because I'm ashamed, and I'm unapologetically a fan of Xena. So it's not like sword and sandal movies and stuff that I'm scared. I know he time traveled in one of the Beastmaster movies. How terrible. But I don't know, man. I love some Mark Singer. I don't know what to tell you. But where was I going with that? Oh, my dad took me to very few movies as a kid, and he went with us to some. But my dad and I saw Top Gun together, both as the entire family and just with him and I, a total of like 3 times. I think that is like holds the record for the most I've ever seen a movie in the theater. Other than that, I usually got to see a movie once, and that was it. And that's if I got to see that movie. But my dad has always had this taste for comedy, and so my dad was the one who took me to see Ghostbusters, even though he's so not a science fiction guy. My dad, to allow my mom to host a Tupperware party at one time, or Mary Kay party, I don't remember which. She wasn't selling it; she was just hosting it for a friend of hers who was selling. But they needed us out of the house, and my dad took myself and my 2 siblings to go see Return of the Jedi, which was absolutely torture for my dad. You know, that'd be like me taking my kids to go see like a re-showing of Spartacus. You know, he hated it, and but it's like a special memory to me that my dad went with me. So I try to redo that with the kids. I try to take them to see the superhero movies and things, and kind of have that little touchstone for them to remember someday when maybe dad isn't around so much or at all. So yeah, I think we'll definitely go see some Dungeons and Dragons. Evil Dead comes out April 1st, which is a weird date, but knowing the humor of like Bruce Campbell and that crew, it fits. I really don't know what to say about it. I didn't see the remake. I don't know what this one's going for. I've not seen Ash versus the Evil Dead. Um, I I'm sort of out of that style of horror movie anymore. Uh, I like an old creepy house with cobwebs and a hand that reaches out from behind a bookcase, and basically Scooby Doo, right? My horror experience is basically either The Witch or Scooby Doo, and then nothing else. But I like that this exists, but I worry that it falls into this category of things that I'm sick of, just not being allowed to be finite. Let it be done. Let that franchise exist and be done. So it'll be interesting. It'll be it'll be neat to see what the response is to it. And I will forever love Bruce Campbell. I have not seen Bruce Campbell in anything that I've not absolutely just been giddy to see him in. Bubba Hotep, for example, top 10 movie experience with my brother, man. It was just bananas to see that and not have any idea that it existed. Bruce Campbell, you can't go wrong. I don't know how involved he is with this particular one, if he's just going to have a cameo or what the deal is. I saw he was like online shilling the trailer, so I assume he has something to do with it, although the main cast looks like maybe it isn't involving him. And I remember him saying that it's hard physically on him to be Ash anymore, which I can definitely imagine. So anyway, that one's coming out in April. Shortly after is the Super Mario movie. I don't know what to say about that. It seems ridiculous that people have strong opinions about it with Chris Pratt involved. Let a kid movie be a kid movie. I hate that they don't use voice actors, that they just use actors, celebrity voices. But it is what it is, and that's what they do now. For some reason, Tom Hanks worked as Woody on Toy Story. And I feel like between him and Tim Allen embodying those characters and it was going on before that, but I feel like that officially set the expectation that we have to have big name actors voicing these. I think of like Will Smith on Shark Tale, and Mike Myers as Shrek. Just It gives me a headache. I just wish that we had voice actors still and weren't just casting celebrities. But celebrities are trained professionals who do use their voice as a tool, so maybe that's unfair of me. And I think it'll be a fun movie regardless of who's voicing things. It will either suck or be entertaining, and it's not going to be either way because of the voice work. Yeah, that Mario. I mean, Mario's a part of our life, and it's hard. to remember that Mario is almost as old as Pac-Man, and we see Pac-Man as something kitschy and sort of nostalgia, and we all like Pac-Man, and Pac-Man stuff is fun, and but Mario has been there. Mario hit the scene, was significant to our life experiences in one way or another, and he's been there since. And he's been updated and fresh, and Mario Kart and Mario Golf and the new Mario where you throw hats on things, and Dr. Mario. I mean, Mario is an important thing in our life. He's like Astro Boy or Tintin or Mickey Mouse. I mean, Mario has become a staple of a certain type of entertainment to the world, and it absolutely seems it seems a shame not to give it a chance just because people are upset at Chris Pratt. After that, Guardians of the Galaxy in May. My son and I did not see the third Guardians of the Galaxy, or excuse me, the second Guardians of the Galaxy in the theater. And when we finally watched it together on Disney Plus and were dying laughing, we were really regretful we didn't see it. I took him when he was really little to see Guardians 1, and that was because I wanted him to have that Star Wars experience. That was kind of his first big boy movie that we went and saw. And so him and I have sort of grown up through the movie selections and permissibility based around these Marvel movies. And so I feel obligated to go see that one with him just because it's the end. Bautista has made it pretty clear he does not want to be Drax anymore. And, it'll be interesting to see how they write him off. However, I am sick to death of the character of Star-Lord. And I think his actions in the Infinity movies, which I'm admittedly not a huge fan of these comic book movies, even though I watched them all with my kid, but I think that character was killed. I mean, he's an idiot. And I don't know that I care to see him go through another 2 hours of some sort of soul-seeking redemption. Hopefully it focuses on other members of the team. I'm just done with Star-Lord. Again, Chris Pratt, but nothing against him. It's the character that I'm tired of. A new Fast and Furious movie. Joe Patrick will be happy with that. My friend Matt, I think, recently power slammed through the entire series while he was at work. So, it's hilarious that these Fast and the Furious movies have become such a big franchise, and it's kind of incredible and awesome. Laugh all we want about the quality of them or the lowbrow appeal of them, but I'm all for it. If the industry can support that, and if that is sort of the bread and games that the people want, it's okay. It's okay. And it also means that I may be able to sometime write a book that captures the imagination of the populace because, not everything has to be the English patient. Yeah, sometimes you just need a reliable, dumb action movie with a formula and a cast of characters that are shallow but predictable, and it feels like home, and it's fine. It's absolutely fine, and I love that this thing has legs, even though I've seen like maybe two of them. Another movie that had a lot of online backlash, which probably goes without saying anymore, The Little Mermaid. The less said about it, the better. It's just embarrassing that people were so upset about casting Ariel as a woman of color because it's a frickin' mermaid, for Pete's sake. If anything, I'm just kind of irritated that Disney feels a need to make live action of all these, animated tentpoles in their catalog. It just completely adds to that whole discussion of things being creatively bankrupt. And I hope it's good. I hope kids love it. I hope that a whole new segment of the population can identify with this whimsical, magical character, this heroine. But I have no interest in anything Disney's doing anymore. Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse is the one thing that my son and I won't shut up about, and we cannot wait for it to happen. That first movie was incredible, and he's watched it dozens of times. And for my son, I mean, Spider-Man is Miles. Peter Parker, of course, who's Spider-Man? Peter Parker, but he's not interested in Peter Parker or Peter Parker's problems or his relationship with his aunt and his employers and the Parker luck. Uh, he he's invested in Miles, and I love it. I love Miles, and I love what they've done with the Spider-Verse. I hope this next one sticks to landing. I have no reason to think that it shouldn't. And yes, animated superhero movies, as long as they're just not like those direct to home Marvel and DC movies that they were doing a couple years back. If there's something like this that are done with craft and some bombastic reason to exist, then yes, I agree with you. Animated superheroes, let's quit casting these people. Let's just make fun movies. I don't need Superman Doomsday direct to home DVD, though. Give me a break. New Transformers movie in June. I know nothing about those. Flash allegedly is going to come out in June. What a weird situation around that movie, both because of the DC universe, Ezra himself, that movie getting pushed and pulled around. Now with what's his name taking over. I agree. I do not know how that Flash movie can be released. I think you throw any integrity out the window as a studio if you try to profit off that. And that's exactly what they're hoping to do, is just make their money back, because this single actor and his actions and behaviors have made the entire character of the Flash and the movie him involved in just toxic. I mean, it should be this white hot. I'm not one to call for like a boycott, but it seems to me like you kind of tell on yourself a little bit as an adult if you go to see that movie and support it, regardless of what your opinion is of the Flash or DC in general. I mean, he's a terrible, terrible person, and we don't want him to gain from this. We don't want the studio to gain from this. And with the reports that have come out recently where Warner Brothers says the door is kind of open for him to return as the Flash because they feel like he's been penitent enough and done some rehab, I think it's hypocritical. I think there's other people who have paid much stronger prices for much less behavior. So it seems absolutely insane to me that that's even just a few months away, but who knows what'll happen. After The Flash, there's some Pixar movie called Elemental. So, Pixar. I never thought I'd get to the time in my life when I'm just absolutely over Pixar, but I am absolutely over Pixar. Whether it be their sequels or their original stuff, there's no joy in it anymore to me. They seem formulaic to me now as an adult watching them. And, I don't know what to tell you. Maybe I hate fun, but just the magic's gone with Pixar as far as I'm concerned. Indiana Jones, no thank you. What is this other one here? Oh, Mission Impossible in July. Now there's a franchise I really enjoy. And here I am dogging on Ezra and willing to support Tom Cruise. So again, we don't always make the wisest, most compassionate choices with our dollars, I guess. But I love those Mission Impossible movies. The Barbie movie in July. What the heck, man? That is going to be nuts. That is like, I don't know, Nicholas Refn movie. I don't know what to even compare it to. It'll be interesting. I don't know who the audience is for that. And, the Lego movie, when it came out, we saw it and it was good. My son liked it and I thought it was fun. But a whole part of that movie seemed like it had a hard time deciding who its audience was. But lucky for Legos, adults have adopted the toy, and I think it did fine. But I don't know about Barbie, man. It looks like it's meant for snarky young adults, and I don't know. It's kind of like that Brady Bunch movie that came out a while back. It just I don't know what to think about it. I'm not angry about it. It just seems weird. Um, the Oppenheimer movie looks absolutely stupid. I can't imagine a movie about Oppenheimer in his role in the atomic bomb being compelling on any level, especially from a visual director. Unless they blow up a bomb every 5 minutes, it's a waste of everybody's talent. I don't know that he makes movies I even want to see anymore, or that he ever did, to be honest, although he's very good at his craft. Oppenheimer is a weird choice, and it'll probably get nominated just because of the subject matter, but no thank you. Hard pass. And I am a person who is absolutely fascinated with nuclear energy and not just warfare, but just the development and the harnessing of nuclear power and the ethics of whether we should or shouldn't, and all that goes along with that. And I have no desire to see Oppenheimer, I guess, is the short version. And I can't imagine that the public will respond in kind. Not that I think the movie will be terrible. I think he'll set out to make a biopic that paints him as a tortured soul, and he'll be successful. But there's nothing there for me. Yeah, I'm glad you say that, Sean, because I'm in the same boat as you. Like, that should be up my wheelhouse, and there's absolutely nothing there for me. After that, the Marvels. I think that's the movie where we finally get Monica Rambeau, and then Brie Larson comes back, and um, is it Ms. Marvel? Is that the Kamala? Is she Ms. Marvel? I kind of forget, but that should be a good time. I didn't like Captain Marvel, and I don't really care for Brie Larson, but that's nothing personal. It's completely because I don't like superhero movies. Um, and the ones that I enjoy are usually because I enjoy them with my son and nothing to do with the movie itself. Uh, if it isn't Black Panther or Spider Man, then usually it's torture for me to sit through it. And Captain Marvel to me was torture. It was absolute torture to sit through. And take that as you will. But that one's coming out, and I hope it does well. There's a reboot of Ninja Turtles. It looks like coming. I don't know anything about that. There's a weird. It looks like Blue Beetle, maybe. I don't know what that is. It's like a blue scarab. There's no title on the logo. Yeah, I don't know what that is. That's on August 18th. Is there a Beetle movie coming out? Or is that some Spider-Man from Sony or something? I don't know, man. That's weird. But I'll have to look up and see what that is. Craven the Hunter is down for October 6th. I'm a fan of Craven in the comic books, but I'm a fan of safari hunting. So he is an old style pulp villain as far as I'm concerned. And the more they drag him into the modern age, the weirder and more supernatural he gets and the more corny he seems. I mean, Craven the Hunter to me is a person that gets Spider Man in one of the 1 million flavors of the retellings of the most dangerous game. And that's what makes him fun to me. And they won't do that with this movie. So I probably will not see that movie. However, they got an entire year to snag me. That's October. Dune 2 comes out in November. I've not seen Dune 1 yet. Love Dune. I just haven't seen the new movie. I've purchased it. It's right next to the new Blade Runner on my Amazon list that I've paid money to own the rights to stream it, and I've not watched them. I just can't get myself hyped to do it. At one time, Tim and I were super hype about it. We were gonna read all the books up to it and do them on our book club, and then go see the movie together and talk about the movie for the book club and for podcasts. And it all just fizzled out. And I don't know why. I don't know why. I have nothing against it. I just there's something pretentious and weird and unwelcome about it to me. And part of it is probably gatekeeping. It's me and a property that I had a lot of love for when it felt like something that very few of us in a secret club knew about. And, it became a part of the greater Hollywood parlance. And I think that ruined some of the magic for me. Um, I think. I don't know. Or I just don't care about science fiction movies anymore, which kind of sucks, but I think that's what it boils down to. There's a new Wonka movie in December. No, thank you. A new Ghostbusters movie in December. No, thank you. Aquaman movie in December. No, thank you. But that is the list of movies that I was sent for a calendar. I'm sure there's several other movies out there, but those are the ones that were selected for that particular counter. So I think movie theaters are going to do okay in 2023, although the overall quality of what they're giving us seems down. And that's a good sign, I think. I think it's a good sign. I think it means that there's still some risks being taken on these nerdier pursuits. I don't think there's a superhero bubble that's going to pop. If it wasn't popped by now, it's not going to pop. We could be ramping into another golden age. And speaking of that, because I've already gone long, I'll probably not talk about these Valiant comics this time. I'll save it for next week. But speaking of that, this seems like poorly timed comic book esque movies would have done better now, I think. And it's almost like we got the deconstruction of comic book movies before comic book movies became a modern phenomenon. And so I'm thinking of Hancock, which wasn't great, but it was a deconstruction of superhero movies with Will Smith. Of course, Unbreakable by M. Night Shyamalan with Bruce Willis. They've turned that into a pseudo franchise, and it was embarrassing and awful as far as I'm concerned. But that first movie, I think, is an interesting concept, and again, a sort of deconstruction of movies. The Watchmen movie. Say what you will about Zack Snyder and his fans and his films, but Watchmen was a pretty adept translation of the Watchmen comic to the screen. And compared to what the DC movies have looked like, I think Watchmen is one of the high points of DC adaptations. And I feel like it came out too soon in the cycle. I feel like had that been on the screen, it would have enjoyed some of that same The Batman and Joker love that was thrown around just because people were so hungry for something with a little bit of quality to it. And I don't know, maybe I'm barking up the wrong tree with that one, but there it is. And there was another movie that I had I lost it again. It was the one that about the kids that was like a found footage movie that they get the superpowers, and one of them's kind of a jerk, and so they have to kind of fight that kid. They're teenage kids, kind of up to no good, and they sort of realize that they have a responsibility to stop their antisocial friend from using his powers to do big damage. And Chronicle might be the name of it. I'm forgetting the name. My memory is garbage. But again, good movie, and one that I think would have done even better. And there was one about like a little African American kid that gets special powers, and he's immature, and I think it's his mom and dad are trying to raise him, but he's evil. He's like an evil little Superman Human Torch thing. I don't remember the name of it, but and that came out since like Iron Man and all that, so it was definitely well within this cycle. But I think those sorts of movies, kind of show us that we're interested in that genre of story, even if we're not interested in these. Yeah, Brightburn. Thank you, for Pete's sake. I did not have that name coming to me for the life of me. I'm happy that I thought of Hancock, to be honest. So So anyway, that's the state of movies. Will you risk going to the movies? If risk is the right word, will you bother to go to the movies? Will you pay to go to the movies? Have we been spoiled about the turnaround? They're weaponizing that against us now. We're all sort of willing to stream things in our home, but they've been more than happy to charge us exorbitant prices. Um, the Green Knight, for instance, it cost me $20 to see it. It would have been cheaper to see it in the theater. And that's not one I'm going to watch with my family. So you can't tell me that, well, it's because you're going to watch it at home and, we could have sold 4 tickets to it. And it's just me watching it. And A Green Knight is a sort of movie when I was in my mid 20s, I would have watched several times. But my patience for movies is so low that, I've watched it a couple times. And that's a triumph in my book. The fact that I've watched it as many times as I've watched Moonstruck in the last year, and that is supposed to be like a seal of quality because how hard it is for me to get through a cinematic experience, even when I'm on the couch, have subtitles on and can pause it and have unlimited access to marginally cheaper soda. So I was going to segue into a discussion on our New Year's resolutions and about success as adults and Valiant Comics, but I think I'll save that. I think I'll save it for next week because there's a lot there, and I don't want to make this thing like 3 hours long. We're already well over an hour, and I'll just kind of let this fizzle out at the end, and we'll have topics for next week. So I'm happy you guys showed up tonight. We had we never did quite hit our 5 chatters at once, a goal. We're slowly building. I don't know, much like book sales. When I release a book, I can count on a certain number of books to sell in the first couple months because I have supportive friends, and they're all sweethearts, and I feel guilty at twisting their arms, but I do my self-promotion thing, and they do their friend thing and pick up a copy. And then that peters out after a while, and it takes a while for me to start getting that stranger support. I have 15 followers, I think it says here, 16 followers now. I think we haven't quite got into the phase where it's stranger support yet. Twitch would like me to get into the 50 followers range before the next level up. So that's my goal, but patience is a virtue, and I'm not doing anything here special that can draw a crowd compared to what else is happening on Twitch right now. Tried to be a good citizen here on Twitch and not just ask for views, but actually give some views. So I've sort of lurked to see what's going on out there, and it's a young person's game. It's a game with a lot of skin and a lot of nonsense and a lot of flash. And I'm just a 40-year-old fat Iowan with a virtual pet on this side. I don't know how to use a flipped camera, and I video game and talk into a microphone. So I've set my anticipations realistically. And one of my friends, who I always value his opinion, John, early on when I was saying I'm going to do this, and he was like, I think it's going to be good for you. I think you'll enjoy streaming and chatting with people, and it will be a good platform for your podcast, but you're not going to make an income from this. And it was sweet of him to put it to me kindly. And I do get kind of swept up in potential of projects, but I think this is one that I didn't need the reminder. I think I'm aware that this is not going to be a full-time gig for Carl Smith. So everybody's showing up to the gimmick-free, Carl rambling, mental health, social issue, pop culture, nonsense circus. And I guess next week we'll talk some Valiant Comics. Just to tease it, since it was something that I wrote and thought about for quite a bit, is I'm a big fan of Valiant Comics. They rebooted in 2012-ish, 2011, 2012. They were purchased and relaunched from scratch. They didn't have the gold key characters anymore, so no Magnus, for instance, no robot fighting going on. but they took a lot of the original characters that were developed by the Jim Shooter era Valiant, and they did have rights to those, and just rebooted them all. But when they did it, they did something brilliant, and they decided if we're going to create an alternative superhero universe to DC and Marvel, that we need to do something that we're able to do with our flexibility and our size and our catalog and make something special out of it. And they have a very tight, planned, and executed roadmap for how things tie in and the continuity and the effects they have on one another, and the events have meaning, and everything sort of organically leads to the next thing. They did everything absolutely perfect, and were punished for it. And we'll talk a little bit about that. I collected it from the beginning. I pulled almost every book that they were publishing, including the trade paperbacks and hardcovers. And I just notified that my antivirus protection is expired. Is that something you should announce online? But anyway, I was pulling all those Valiant comics and had a nice collection. I donated it to a charity, a raffle, and was okay with that because you guys know how much I hate clutter, almost as much as I like collecting. And it was raffled off for a good cause, and I didn't really think much about it, kind of moved on with my life. But then recently I got thinking about it. I'm like, man, I'd really like to read that. But there was no one book that I wanted to read. I wanted to read all of it. So I'll talk a little bit about that journey and all that, but it's been heavy on my mind. And it's funny because it's brought up a lot of topics, getting back into it, that are worth discussion for the Goadkicker, including people being angry at the inclusion of women in seats of power behind the scenes, and allegations of going woke and going broke, and a company that struggled financially because of COVID, and what the market for comic books is like, and trying to move into movies and be too big for their britches, and outside investors and corporations getting involved and changing the tone and the culture of what happens at the business that affects the stories on the page. All sorts of things. And I think it'll be a good discussion, and we'll save it for next week so we don't shortchange it. So until next week, thanks for joining me here on this Twitch broadcast next Wednesday at 8:30 until my side gig messes with my schedule. That'll be Goadkicker time. And be watching your Twitch notifications. Make sure you're following notifications. It may alert you to the fact that I'm on either playing Castlevania, Rondo of Blood, or Elden Ring, as I get comfortable with some streaming. I should, in a couple weeks, be in possession of a capture card that's on its way, and we will be streaming Switch games to get ready for the release of Final Fantasy Pixel Remasters for the Nintendo Switch. And I'm going to try to play through all of them, 1 through 12. And it should be an interesting journey, and we'll see how far we get. If we see the end of those games, it'll be a miracle, because other than number 1 and number 7, I don't think I've finished a single Final Fantasy game. Oh, and Tactics, but that one doesn't count because they don't have it on Switch. So anyway, until next time, everybody, follow me on Twitter at Carl Smith Writer. If you have any comments or things you want to see talked about on the show, please help me promote the channel. I would love that. Ostensibly, this is supposed to promote my writing, and I said nothing about my writing today, but that's fine. You may see me pop on the channel now and then on an unscheduled picture-in-picture where I'll actually do my writing and have the channel open for some chat. And so don't be gun-shy to stop in. And I love you all. I think you're all the best for the most part. Draw your own adventure. I need to do more of those. And I didn't do a good job with the early ones. They needed a lot of editing, but I still believe strongly in the premise and story of my life, right? Good idea, poor execution. But, who knows what the future will hold for Mr. Bigfoot Jones. But until next time, everybody, Have a great week. Take care of yourselves and take care of each other. Good night.